and good morning, afternoon, evening to you all from wherever you are all over the world. I'm in far north Queensland, Australia on Irriganji land, and beautiful day up here in Cairns, and looking forward to spending some time outside later today after our lunch and learn session, or dessert and learn, morning tea and learn, wherever you are. Really keen to hear from you in the chat. I'll keep an eye on that as I go, so if you need to interrupt me, that's fine. Feel free to do that. Otherwise, I will get to questions and stuff at the end. So the way I wanted to structure our short session today is first just a little bit of theory, but then really just jumping in and having a bit of a play, and also handing over to you to have a bit of a play as well. So as Paul mentioned, we want to talk about enhancing contrast in your data today and really making things pop, and that's really all that it's about. So to start with, I just want to give it a little bit of a background and think about why you may want to enhance contrast in your data. So for example, this is an orthomosaic here that you can see of one of the islands of the Great Barrier Reef, and it's overexposed, so it's really quite bright. And so we may want to enhance the contrast to bring out the darker colors a little bit more and get that color balance right, and it makes it a little bit more visually pleasing and also easier for analysis. At the other end of the spectrum, this is a multispectral data set that we've got here, and it's underexposed. So it's really quite dark, and that makes it difficult to see individual features in that image. So we would use contrast enhancement to brighten it up, and again, making those features pop. Another type of data, it's still red, green, blue data, also on the Great Barrier Reef, and this time all of the contrast is a little bit out. So it's not just a brightness or a darkness thing, it's just really missing some of the colors that we would like to see. So enhancing the contrast is really picking out the individual features, and in this case, we're looking at bleached coral colonies. And the last example is looking at a digital surface model, where the image that you see is highly skewed towards tall features. In this case, they're trees on an island. But if I'm interested in some other features that are in the image, but actually really difficult to see based on the color range that we're using, then I would use contrast enhancement to make other features of the image more focused. In this case, we're looking at some of the areas around this island and looking at the beach and rock features there as well. So those are some examples of where we might like to use contrast enhancement. And now just for a teeny tiny bit of theory. So if contrast enhancement is new to you, here's a little bit of a background about what's actually happening when we go to see these effects. So first of all, one of the key things that's really important to understand is that computers have the ability to display a number of different shades of color. So there's 256 shades ranging from 0 to 255. So 0 is a number. So things that are really dark fall down the 0 end and bright up at the 255. But when we take drone images, photos, we may not be using all of the colors that are available. So in this example here, we might have data that sits within a range of 50 to 150 in terms of those brightness levels. So what happens when we're enhancing the contrast is that we're taking that value of 50 and stretching it all the way down the end so it appears the full range of darkness, and that 150 all the way up to the full range of brightness. And that allows us to see a lot more distinction between the individual data values that we have. And then sometimes we're interested in not just all of the data that we've captured, but a portion of that, like what I was showing with the digital surface model. I was actually not really interested in the tall trees, so I can sort of clear those out, but I'm interested in areas that have a certain range of brightness values. So I might really want to highlight those. And again, I would do the same sort of thing where I stretch those out so that I can use the full display of the computer. So it's a really simplistic way of looking at it, but the slight challenge to this as well is that unless you have a color vision impairment, you know that we actually see things in a mixture of red, green, and blue all the way through all those mixes to the full range of colors in the rainbow. So what this actually looks like in reality is, instead of having the black to the white, we have the light to the dark in terms of red, green, and blue. And again, that's what the computer is able to show, 0 to 255 in those three areas, red, green, and blue. So again, we might be interested in a portion of the data that we have, and we could be interested in those differently as well. So we might be interested in, say, 100 to 150 arbitrarily of the red, but 80 to 145 in the green. So the way that all manifests out is that we're able to change the way our images look based on the combination of red, green, and blue. All right, so hopefully that gives you a little bit of a background. And now I'll jump into some examples, and we can do this live so that we'll get to have a bit of a play, and hopefully this bit of theory will make sense as we go into practice. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to jump on to a project that I've already created. And I might also just get Joan and Paula, are you able to please pop in the link to the contrast enhancement blog for me as well, please, into the chat. So there's a little bit extra resources for those online to go back to if they're interested in any of these concepts. So what you should be able to see on the screen at the moment is I've created a project in GeoNadir, and I've got a number of different data sets there, and we're going to jump into a couple of these different data sets. I'm going to show you how I work with the contrast enhancement, then I'll hand it over to you to have a bit of a play for yourself as well. So I've actually got two data sets sort of hidden under these yellow points up here, and then some up in the Scotland area as well. So to start with, I'm going to start with one of the easiest data sets to work with contrast enhancement. And I'm going to zoom into this area of the Great Barrier Reef. So here's Cairns, where I'm at today. And I'm going to pop into this location here. And to zoom all the way in, you'll see the island of one of the islands of the Great Barrier Reef that I showed in my very first example, where it's quite overexposed. So it's really, really bright. And what we want to do is just get that color balance right for this particular island. So to do that, all I'm going to do is I can pull this down to get my orthomosaic DSM or DTM, and I'm just going to open the style bar for this particular data set. I can also hit S on the keyboard to do that as well. And what I want to do is if I want to darken an image up, I'm actually going to bring the red, the green, and the blue all in a little bit. And because I need to darken it across all colors, I'll do them evenly, or roughly evenly. So I'm going to pop this into about here. And it's a little bit of trial and error to get it right. But hopefully you should be able to see on the screen now that there's a lot better contrast between the features on this particular island. All the little black bits around here that you see are lots of seabirds as well. So if you make a mistake, you can always change things. So you can play with the slider, you can change the numbers, and you can also refresh that to take it back to its original state there as well. So that's the first example, and hopefully that's a really simple one for you to play with to see if you can get it looking from really bright and overexposed to something that looks a little bit more like, it's a bit more pleasing to the eye, I guess, and the colors are a bit stronger as well. All right, so from there, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go head a little bit north of here and take you into a slightly more complex example. So I'm going to go into Low Isles. And so let's have a look at this particular location. All right, so a couple of things that I'm interested in here. Excuse me. So this is another island of the Great Barrier Reef. And for the purposes of this example, I've got two data sets. So I've got this one sitting on top, and then this one is from June last year. And then I've got a second data set sitting behind that from January this year. And so as I compare these two data sets, you'll see that there's quite a bit of change in the sand around the island. So some sand loss up here, and then there was some sand gained down this area as well. So the islands are really dynamic, and this is a fairly natural process, so not something to be really concerned about that we're losing islands on the Great Barrier Reef. These things change all the time. So what I'm going to now do is look at how contrast enhancement can help us gain quantitative information out of this change as well. So to do this, what I want to do is actually to look at the digital surface model as opposed to the RGB image. So this is the digital surface model of the June data, so data from last year. And what you can see is it's really dominated by the heights of trees on the island. But I'm not so much interested in the trees. I'm interested in the geomorphology or the shape of the island. So those are the features that I want to enhance so that I can extract information about that. So I'm going to come over and I can do a little bit more of this sort of iterative practice where I just have a bit of a play to see what's going to give me a reasonable contrast enhancement. Or I can also use the inspect tool, which will help me understand what the actual data values are. So for example, I know there's some interesting stuff around this area. And so what I'm trying to do now is figure out what those values are, because those are the values that I want to really enhance. So I've looked at that here, and the value that I get is 0.69. So that tells me that I really want to change the contrast around about that 0.69 area. So that might mean I want to pull this all the way down to 1, for example. And that starts to make these features pop a little bit more. I could really highlight it in around the 0.69 area if I liked, but having just that one value in this one location doesn't necessarily tell me all of the story of the range of values that I want to enhance. So another tool that I can use is to choose, up here we've got our points, lines, and polygons. I'm going to choose the line tool, and I'm just going to draw a line across here. And then by selecting that with my digital surface model, I'm going to use this terrain profile tool. And what this will do is give me a bit of a cross section of the data values. So what I can see is this is on the x-axis, that's the distance along this line that I've drawn, and the y-axis is my range of elevation values that I'm looking at. So I can easily see I've got a value in my DSM from between negative 0.09 all the way up to my max being 0.82. So if I then look at changing my contrast based on those values, I should get the most contrast in those areas. So let's change this to 0.1, so it was at 0.09. And then what was my max at about 0.9 there as well. So when I change those values based on this area that I'm looking at here, you can see I get a lot of contrast in these features around this part of the beach. So that makes it kind of cool. And then if we think about this makes it really easy for our eyes to see. And so then if it's really easy for us to see with our eyes, then it starts to make it a lot easier to quantify things with other tools as well. So for example, I can see really sharply that around this yellow line here, which is around the edge of the island. So I might want to draw shapes around that. Or I could also use our magic wand tool to be able to automatically pull out where the island is there. So just clicking on that, and that should give us a nice polygon of our island. And then I could commit that if I'm happy with the shape that it creates. I can commit that to our table of contents. We're going to go through the magic wand in another lunch and learn seminar, so don't worry too much about that one. But just hopefully that gives you a bit of an idea of how you can start to extract quantitative information by doing contrast enhancements. One of the other things that you're then able to do is, if you remember at the beginning I showed, well, actually I've got two data sets. I've got June, and then I've got June of last year and January of this year. And I wanted to look at some change. So I've done the DSM on one layer. Now I want to have a look at the DSM of the second date here, which is the more recent data. So I want to go ahead and I want to amend the contrast on this second date as well. Now the data, this one didn't have GCP, so the values are different on the second data set. So I need to have a bit of a play with that one, get the values to, and again, I could use those same tools to check what range I want to do. But from something I was playing with earlier, I worked out that it was about minimum here, maximum around about there. That gives me a good range for that data set. And then what I can do is I can play with the opacity. So I can see one data set on top of the other. And then I can now really easily see the difference between my two images purely because I changed that contrast. And now I'm looking at two things together. So I can then jump over to that magic wand tool. And if I wanted to say, let's maybe have a look at this patch here and see if it can pull out what that difference in sand is in that particular area. And it automatically does that. And you can, of course, change the contrast again to start to tighten up some of those areas if you want. Might also be interested here. This area was a loss of sand. So I can do that and hopefully pull out that region. And then I could do some volumetric analysis on what it returns there as well. That one I might need to play with a little bit more. So again, hopefully that helps you understand that link between playing with something purely for visually, but then how you take that to the next step of doing something quantitative. All right, I've got one more example that I would like to go through. So let's jump all the way back out and this time pop into this region here. And what I want to do this time is have a look at a multispectral data set because this one can be a little bit different to the RGB and the DSM that we're looking at as well. So let's jump into this location here. You can see we've got multispectral data here. The near infrared is being displayed as red. So if you haven't used multispectral data before, Joan can pop in a link to the multispectral blog that we've got, and that can help you understand that a little bit more. But basically, if you just keep in mind that stuff that looks red is generally really dense vegetation or healthy vegetation. So I'm going to go through the same process and play with my contrast enhancement. And I'm going to play with a little bit here. I really want to emphasize the red here. So red light is actually being displayed as green here, which can be really confusing if you haven't used multispec before. But what I want to do is pull out these areas that are a bit drier and not quite so in good health. And you'll see they start to appear quite yellow as I play with the red and the green. I don't need to touch the blue. It's really about the red and the green, which is using the near infrared and the red. So I can continue to play with that. And then again, with the idea that perhaps we want to pull out something quantitative, I'm actually going to look at seeing if I can individually map these features here. So I'm just going to quickly whiz around and pop a click in each of them there. And then run the model on that, and hopefully that will pull each of those out for me now that we've got that stronger level of contrast. So a couple of minor additions or changes to make. So I maybe want to tidy that little bit up there. But otherwise, I can commit that and make any changes that I want after I commit it and know that I've got 11,000 meters squared covered on that one. If I wanted to pop in and get some of these areas and say I wanted to map these patches, I could do that quite easily. With some of these ones that are really less defined boundaries, I can also pop in some background ones, so things that I don't want it to include, and that can often help these small patches as well. But again, these types of things are much, much more difficult. Oh, that's not such a good one there. Didn't pull that out so well. But it's a lot more difficult for these tools to work if you haven't enhanced the contrast first to really make the features pop. Let's see if I can get this one going here. And this is dependent on the zoom level that you're at as well. There we go, we've got that one. We'll pull this one in as well. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of a feel for what contrast enhancement is, why it is that we might do it in the first place, and a couple of examples of things that you can play with for yourself. What I'm going to do is I've made this a project that anyone can edit on this one. So I'm now going to put this in the chat, and you're welcome to have a bit of a play. Just when everybody is in on editing, these types of changes do actually get committed to the project, which I don't mind, but just be aware what other people are doing as well while you're playing with it at the same time. And I'm happy to take questions then.
Thanks, Karen. We've got one question that Joan has answered in here, but I'll ask it anyway. You might have another answer as well. Can you clip out a range of values in the data so you can just visualize the relevant areas?
No, not so specifically. I mean, what you can do is just with the contrast, you can pull it into just that range that you're interested in, and then above that range will appear saturated or white, and above will appear dark or black. So that's the way you make that pop. But there's no, at this stage, there's no ability to, I guess, threshold your data where you say, I'm only going to take values between this point and this point, and actually effectively delete or mask out anything else. They don't disappear. What you can do though is you can mask by a region. So for example, if I was to draw a polygon, if this was the area that I was interested in with this particular data set, and I'm not interested in anything outside of that, then I can crop in that way and remove spatially things that I don't want, but I can't remove radiometrically values that I don't want.
Cool. A question from Greg. Joan's getting into it in the chat there. We looked at multispectral. How does it work with thermal imagery? And Greg's talking about use case. Use case being around wildlife species, counting in heavily wooded areas.
Yeah, exactly the same. So you just pull up the orthomosaic and then really tighten those values. So if you're interested in wildlife, and so if it's a warm-blooded species, then you'd be really just honing into those high value pixels, and the rest you don't care if they're saturated or dark. It doesn't matter as long as you know the values of those ones that you're interested in. That will really make them pop.
So if you've got any more questions, feel free to come off mute as well if you like, and would rather just sort of ask the question than type it in. Feel free to do that. So Karen's obviously shown through with RGB and multispectral data. We also do thermal data processing as well on the platform, and introduce you to our new tool, Magic Wand, that was just released this week. We will be putting some more out on that tool, so you get a sneak peek into that tool and how to use it. Has anyone else got any other questions? Feel free to come off mute.
We will also be doing a follow-up specific to multispectral data and how you understand those colors that it's creating as well. So if that's new for you, stay tuned for that lunch and learn session, and we can go through those things too.
Well, we haven't got any more questions. Karen, is there anything final that you wanted to mention or go through then?
No, I think that's good. I maybe just one other thing. You can also apply this contrast enhancement to a greenness index. So if you've created a greenness index of your RGB data, so that's another layer that you generate where the greener a value is, the more green it looks. And so you can really highlight specific areas that you're interested in as well. So maybe you're interested in the most green stuff or the least green stuff, depending on what it is that you're working with.
Okay, we obviously do a lot of sharing of projects, and the platform is built for people to share projects with their teams. If I, as the project owner, I've gone in and I've done some of these contrast enhancements and I then share it with my team, do they see those contrast enhancements? Can they use this tool as well if I've shared it with them?
Yeah, so they will see the contrast enhancements. I guess a note is that the contrast enhancement tool is for professional and Pro Plus subscriptions. So if you're on a professional or Pro Plus subscription, and you invite editors into your projects, then they will have the ability to do this, which is what I've done for you all with that link that's in the chat there. So you can definitely play with that one on this particular project. If you're not in a Pro or a Pro Plus subscription, you won't be able to do the contrast enhancement in your projects, and neither will anybody that you invite into your project.
So as a Pro and a Pro Plus user, I've got access to those tools. If I share it with someone, they can see the contrast enhancements that I have done. And if they're an editor, they'll also have access to the contrast enhancement tools and be able to change things as well.
Yeah, that's right.
Alrighty, well look, we have covered a lot. We will send out the recording for this all. If you've got any other questions, then please do not hesitate to get in touch. More than happy to jump on a call with people to take you through your specific projects as well. And yeah, so you'll have access to this demo site and project ongoing there, Greg. We'll leave it up for a while for people to continue to have a bit of a play. So we'll be there for some time yet. But if you've got any questions, please feel free, come back to us, and more than happy to help you be successful with your drone mapping data. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks so much, everyone. Have a good afternoon or evening. See ya.